You are walking along the dusty streets of Kabul past children who sell trinkets to scrape at least something for food. The air is saturated with smoke from the foci and distant prayer chants coming from ancient minarets. But under this, at first glance, the usual city landscape hides the horror so deep and systematically cruel that he questioned everything that we are used to thinking about human suffering and how far the power can go destroying innocence. Do you think you imagine the worst what humanity is capable of in relation to the most defenseless? Do you think the darkest pages of history are forever locked in dusty textbooks? Then get ready. Ahead of the story of practice is so barbaric, so deeply rooted in the fabric of Afghan society that next to it the most terrible tales seem to be naive lullabies. We are talking about the so-called Bokbaziye world where children are turned into living toys for entertainment and pleasing to powerful people, hiding behind traditions and religious excuses. From boys who barely reached 9 years old, who are forced to change into women's clothes and dance in front of the crowds of adults, to a whole system of trading children, working with impunity under the auspices of military leaders and officials. These are facts that destroy any illusions about Afghanistan and its hidden culture of cruelty. And it is important to understand, this is not a story about several bad people. This is about a whole system that devours children's innocence and turns it into a product for the powers that be. The most terrifying truth sounds in a local proverb that reflects the perverted logic of this nightmare: women for children, boys for pleasure. Imagine, you are 9 years old. You live in one of the poorest provinces of Afghanistan. Your family did not eat normally for weeks. Your father died in one of the endless wars, for centuries breaking your country into parts. Your mother is desperately looking at the children with empty eyes of a person who understands that he cannot protect them from hunger, that every night they corrode their stomachs. And so he appears, a man in expensive clothes with golden teeth, drives up by car, which is more expensive than your family will see in his whole life. He quietly speaks with your mother, shows her a pack of money, the amount she did not even dream of. He is not out of kindness here. He came to pick you up and turn you into what bacha is called in local culture, a dancing boy who will perform his whims until he becomes unnecessary. This is bachabatsi, which literally translated from Persian means playing with boys. It remains one of the most systematic forms of operation of children in the modern world. And the worst thing is that this is not a hidden practice. It occurs during the day, in front of everyone, is celebrated at parties, where there are police, officials and religious leaders, the very people who should protect children. Boys aged 10 to 18 years are dressed in women's clothing, their faces are painted with cosmetics, their hair is laid in complex hairstyles. They are taught to dance, move in such a way as to entertain the audience. But dancing is only the beginning. After the performance, when the crowd dispersed and the money changed their hands, the children are led behind closed doors, where their further fate is decided by adults. Men participating in bachabazi built an entire excuse system for what they were doing. They claim that this does not violate traditions, because they do not consider it a relationship. They say that this is not a crime, because it supposedly does not concern women. Thus, a whole system of beliefs was created, which allows participants to remain respected members of society, religious people and families. The recruitment process is as systematic as cruel. The main goals are street children, orphans and boys from extremely poor families. Sometimes they are simply abducted from houses or directly from the streets where they beg for food. In other cases, desperate families balancing on the verge of hunger are offered money in exchange for sons, promising that children will be educated and opportunities that they would never have otherwise. But perhaps the most destructive recruitment in this process is how it presses on the fundamental human instinct of survival. Parents who are ready to die in order to protect their children are faced with an impossible choice: to watch how the son dies of hunger, or give him to people who promise him food and shelter. This is a choice that should not be faced with any family. Nevertheless, thousands of Afghan families are faced with this nightmare every year. The boys themselves have no choice. These are children who are completely helpless in front of adults who control every aspect of their life. They say that they were lucky, that they should be grateful for food and roof over their heads. They are convinced that suffering is the norm, that the world is so arranged for people like them. Having become bacha, the boy loses his own personality. He is given a new name, often female. He is forced to speak in a thin voice, walk in a special way, respond to teams dutifully and gratefully. Its natural development is suppressed through psychological pressure and cruel treatment. It turns into a living doll, completely subordinate to the will of the owner. The learning process is harsh and comprehensive. Boys are forced to learn dancing, carefully worked out movements that emphasize their deliberately feminine appearance. They are taught to apply cosmetics, comb them, pick up clothes so as to please the owners. They must be able to read the mood of adults, guess desires, and fulfill orders without waiting for words. But the point is not only in external skills. There is a purposeful psychological processing. These children are systematically broken, inspiring that their value is determined only by the readiness to obey. They are told that the resistance is pointless, that the escape is impossible, that families abandoned them, and society forgot. Physical violence and punishment become part of everyday life. Those who are trying to resist are beaten, imprisonment, and threats. They are intimidated not only for their own life, but also for the life of their families. Boys quickly make it clear that the escape is impossible. They are shown examples of those who tried to escape, and punishments are so harsh that the thought of freedom disappears by itself. Cruel treatment is systematic and lasts for years. The child belongs to his master, but they can give him to other people, put it on a show at noisy parties, or completely sell him to the new owner if the old one loses interest. Health consequences are destructive. Boys suffer from severe physical injuries, chronic pain, infections, as well as from deep psychological wounds that pursue them all their lives. Many develop depression and anxiety disorders. Some become disabled, others do not withstand constant bullying and simply die. It is especially terrible that the practice of bakbatsi does not hide in the shade, it is woven into the fabric itself. Such parties turn into social events where influential people come, officials, police commanders, military, businessmen. At the bazaars, notes with boys' dances are even openly sold, and everyone understands what exactly is hiding behind this window. For many participants, this becomes a kind of symbol of power. To possess several bakels means demonstrating wealth and influence. The more boys under control, the higher the respect from the environment. This is a perverted status sign that turns children into a product in the market of human suffering. Normalization reaches law enforcement officers. Police do not just close their eyes, but often themselves become part of this system. The courts refuse to consider cases against influential people, and when the arrests still occur, the charges are often brought to children themselves, and not their tormentors. Psychological damage to boys cannot be overestimated. They grow with a sense of complete helplessness, the loss of their own personality, and the belief that the world had betrayed them.
These children live in a state of constant horror.
They never know when they are called, what they will require, and what form will be punished this time. To survive, they develop special psychological mechanisms. They learn to move away from their own body and emotions, as if disappear inside themselves. Many develops that psychologists call learned helplessness, a state in which a person gets so accustomed to humiliation and violence that he ceases to resist even when the opportunity to escape appears. They are suggested that the resistance is useless, that their suffering is inevitable, and help to wait from help. This psychological processing is so effective that some boys even protect their tormentors, claiming that they should be grateful for food and roof over their heads. The worst thing is that the cycle of violence is not limited only by direct victims. Many who survived bakbatsi, growing up, themselves become participants in this practice, having learned that this is how power and relations in their society are arranged. For them, the exploitation ceases to seem crazy, and they reproduce it in relation to the next generation of vulnerable children. So the vicious circle is launched, which is passed down from generation to generation. But the point is not only in psychology. The economy is based on. For those who control boys, this is a way of earning. They are rented for parties and events, which brings significant income to the owners. We are talking about a whole system where a child is considered as a product, whose cost can grow thanks to investments in appearance, expensive clothing, jewelry, cosmetics. But such an investment turns into a terrible price. The more valuable the boy becomes in the eyes of the hosts, the more they demand from him, the more he exhausts his strength, and the faster his childhood, turned into a product. Many are conveyed from hand to hand, sold and resold, like a thing. Each change of owner is a new injury, new rules, new forms of operation. To survive, the children are forced to quickly adapt, like chameleons, adjusting to other people's whims. The age dynamics in the Bakbatsi system should be predictable and tragic scenario. Most often, boys are drawn from the age of 9 to 12 years, when they are especially vulnerable and easily amenable to control. Their value is considered the highest in the early adolescence, when they still have children's features, but they are already quite trained to fulfill the roles assigned to them. With the onset of maturity, when male features begin to appear, their position worsens sharply. This process of growing up turns into a deadly countdown for them. They know that, having reached the end of adolescence or the early 20s, most likely they will be written off and are forced to look for ways to survive on their own. Some are simply thrown to the mercy of fate without a livelihood. Others are left with the owners, not as dancers, but as servants or guards, because they know the secrets of their tormentors too well. But the worst thing is the stigma that remains with them for life. Afghan society belongs to the former Bak with contempt, perceiving them as forever spoiled, despite the fact that they were victims of violence and system. Stigma is so strong that full-fledged integration into a normal life for most is impossible. It is difficult for many to find a job, build relationships, or lead a normal life after they are free. The psychological consequences of Bakbatsi create a generation of deeply injured young people who transfer the scars of the survivor's violence to adulthood. Many develop serious mental disorders, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress state. They are trying to drown out the pain of memories with alcohol or drugs. Some show aggression, having learned that violence is an ordinary part of the interaction between people. Trust becomes almost impossible. These young people were devoted to adults who were supposed to protect them, deceived by those who claimed care, and abandoned by society, which could not save them. Such a fundamental violation of trust is reflected in all subsequent relationships, preventing them from establishing a real connection with other people and believing in the possibility of sincere kindness. The impact on the formation of personality is especially destructive. From childhood, these young people were accustomed to obey other people's expectations, which affects their ability to build a healthy relationship in adulthood. Many experience internal confusion associated with personal identity and self-understanding. After many years of compelled imitation of other people's roles, they may not understand their own desires and reactions, considering them either imposed or learned models of behavior. This internal confusion can persist for decades, preventing them from realizing itself and its place in the world. The consequences for education and development are also catastrophic. Most of these children lose the possibility of full-fledged learning, since most of their life was absorbed in the forced duties and survival, depriving them of their usual preparation, skills, and knowledge necessary for an independent future. Boys involved in this system deprive schools and the opportunity to develop skills and knowledge necessary for independent life. They are taught dancing, the ability to follow other people's requirements, but are not taught to read, write, or critically comprehend their own situation. This educational shortage makes them completely dependent on those who control their lives, and unable to protect their interests. Medical consequences are also significant. Boys suffer from malnutrition and do not receive adequate medical care for injuries or diseases. They are deprived of support that could help cope with the consequences of physical and psychological violence.
Isolation is another system of system control.
Children are cut off from families, communities, and people who could help them understand that their situation is unfair. This addiction makes them completely subordinate to their controllers, creating a distorted affection for those who destroy their lives. The international reaction to Bakbatsi remains insufficient. Political considerations and cultural relativism prevent Western states and international organizations effectively intervene, without causing accusations of imposing their values to Afghan society. The tactical caution of the international community allowed Bakbatsi to continue almost without intervention, while the attention of the world is focused on more noticeable problems, and the system operation of children remains in the shade. This practice has shown amazing resistance in the face of changing political circumstances. During the first reign of Taliban in the 90s of Bakbatsi, it was officially prohibited and strictly punishable, which led to a significant reduction in the number of cases. However, after the fall of the Taliban regime in the 2001 year, the practice was revived with renewed vigor when former commanders of the Mujahideen regained power and influence. Many of these commanders, who participated in Bachchabezi during the Soviet occupation, brought a habit back, occupying positions in the new government. The return of the Taliban to power in 2021 created a complex and contradictory situation. Although the Taliban officially banned practice and introduced strict punishments for the participants, there are reports that some members of the Taliban themselves are involved in the operation of boys. The ban on music and dances prompted the practice underground, which makes it even more difficult to document and controlled by international observers. Secrecy increases the danger to the children themselves. Without a semi-public format of traditional events, boys have fewer opportunities for help or salvation. They are now hidden in private complexes and remote places, completely depriving the chances of interference or escape. Economic poverty, aggravated after the return of the Taliban, also increased the vulnerability of Afghan families. The reduction in international assistance and the destruction of the economy put families before the impossible choice: to observe how their children starve, or give them to people who use their position. The number of boys involved in the Bachchabezi actually increased, despite the fact that practice has become more secretive and dangerous. The psychological effect used in the Bachchabezi system is so strong that many boys never completely recover, even decades after they are outside the system. They are injured in their body, in relations with other people, and in the ability to trust others. Some themselves become aggressive or cruel, having learned that power means the opportunity to use the weak. Others are closed in themselves, unable to establish significant connections with anyone. The most destructive in this system is that it breaks not only individuals, but also entire communities. When society normalizes the exploitation of the most vulnerable, it creates a culture where human dignity becomes the subject of bargaining, where power is more important than basic morality, and the most vulnerable are perceived as a product, and not as people. Boys who survived Bachchabezi often describe their experiences as the death of their former personality and the birth of something completely new. They learn to separate the mind from the body, to exist in a state of constant dissociation in order to bear the impossible. But this survival mechanism has a terrible price, leaving their feeling of detachment from themselves and others for life. This cycle continues today. Somewhere in Afghanistan, a 9-year-old child is again subjected to humiliating control. He is forced to obey other people's whims. In another place, the family is forced to make an impossible decision, choosing between survival and so that their child remains under the control of others. Somewhere another former participant in Bachchabezi is trying to restore life from the ruins of childhood, which was stolen from him before he managed to understand what exactly was losing. This is the reality of Bachchabezi. It is not an ancient practice that remained in the textbooks of history, but a living nightmare, which continues to destroy the lives of Afghan children while the world is turning away. These boys are not statistics and not the subject of scientific research. These are people who needed protection, education, and the ability to grow into safety. Instead, they found themselves in a system created to break them and turn them into guns to satisfy other people's desires. The tragedy of Bachchabezi is not only what she does with individual children. She shows that society allowed this horror to become the norm, built into the institutions of power and protected by those in power. This is a reminder that the most vulnerable among us suffers the most when the systems do not work, when corruption flourishes, and when the interests of strong are more important than human dignity. These children deserve the best. They deserve a world where childhood is security, where boys can grow without fear of being turned into live toys, and those who have power are responsible for protection, and not the operation of innocent. Until this world becomes a reality, the Bachchabezi nightmare will continue, destroying young lives and supporting the cycles of violence that are transmitted from generation to generation. The story of these boys is not only the shame of Afghanistan. This is the shame of mankind, a reminder of how far we still go before we can really say that we protect children from those who want to harm them.